Hey, what's up, guys? This is PJ from Sam. Today I'm back with book recommendations for Type 5 of the Enneagram. Similar to every single video I've done so far, I'm just going to give a brief explanation of what the Type 5 personality structure is all about. And then from there, we're going to go into the book recommendations. So, to put it in the most basic format I can possibly say, let's just say that the Type 5s are the thinkers of the Enneagram. They are the deep thinkers. They are the most intellectual type of the whole framework of the Enneagram, and they're also, the most, you can say, scientific. They are skeptical in terms of accepting something that's been told to them. They're not gonna just hear something and say, okay, fine, that's the truth. They have to really do their own research and discover that for themselves. They're the part of all of us that, asks, is that really true? Or is there more? They have to dig deeper. And, you rarely find a type 5 individual make a decision impulsively. Like, they love to do a profound amount of research before they make a decision. Some types tend to be more impulsive. Type 5s are hesitant. They want to really think through their decision, which is great, but just like any other type, certain qualities can be amplified to a point that they lose their benefit and they go past the point of just becoming beneficial, and they become, it's what do you call it, decreasing returns, or there's a term for it. You can ask a type 5, they wouldn't know the term, because they read a lot of books. And that's why preparing for this video was pretty hard for me, because I was like, how can I mention a book that a type 5 individual hasn't read? They are the researchers. They are the ones that love to figure the answers out for themselves. So another thing about type 5s is that they are very protective of their energy, because they feel like their energy resources are scarce. And so putting themselves in situations where there will be a lot of demand on their time, on their energy, on their resources, that is something that they try to steer themselves away from. So they might, we've had Keystem classes, which are really live online classes over Zoom or Skype for a year now. And I have not seen that many type 5s comparatively to the other types in our classes. And I've wondered why that is. And I kept coming back to the whole personal structure of a type 5. The type 5s don't really like to put themselves in situations where there are a lot of demands on them, as far as, like, you got to show up at this time for this class. And then not only that, you have to open up about your inner world, and that's something that type 5s don't really usually want to do. They don't want to discuss their feelings, and get under the surface from the mind and go into the emotions and, like, answer questions about themselves as to, hey, what's going on? How are you feeling? Are you doing well right now? They don't really want to go in that realm. They just rather think about their emotions. And that's something that you might hear a type 5 individual say. Instead of saying, I feel X, Y, and Z, they say, I think I feel this. And emotions are almost like kept at an emotional, or sorry, at an intellectual distance for them. And again, like I've said, every Enneagram type has its qualities, amazing qualities, good qualities, and it also has its pitfalls. And as I've already mentioned, the pitfall for a type 5 might be that they take a long time to make a decision, might be that they don't want to exert that much energy and be more reserved. So you can see how in a relationship, in an intimate relationship, that might become a problem, especially if they have a partner that gives a lot, that does a lot for them, and they don't feel like they are capable of giving that energy back in return. And so that can cause problems for them. But the qualities about them that are amazing is that, they are the ones that find the deeper truth by becoming very research oriented, becoming a little bit more skeptical than all of us, and really looking with a magnifying glass and seeing what really is going on. And so that's just in super brief, 5 minutes or less explanation of type 5s. And you can learn a lot more about them if you join our course. We've made a whole course about these type descriptions and the basic framework of the Enneagram. And in that, we go into a more in-depth description of the type 5 personality structure. But for now, and for the case of this video, I'll just leave it at that. And we'll go into the book recommendations. So I have to say this, I've been cheating the system a little bit. Instead of just recommending physical books, I'm recommending some audio programs and audio books in there because I personally consume a lot of audiobooks, and that's how I learn well, and that's how I am able to quote unquote read so many books, is because I listen to them. And for me, that's a lot faster. I'm kind of a slow reader. Unlike type 5s, they're phenomenal readers. They're phenomenal researchers, and they're the philosophers, they're the intellectuals. So for me, it's easier to listen, but nonetheless, a lot of these books that I'm going to recommend are also in book format, so you can read or listen to them. Let's just go ahead and start with the book number 1. So the first book I want to recommend, again, like I said, it's an audio book or an audio program, and you can find it on Audible. It's by one of my favorite authors, speakers, researchers, and I believe he's passed away now, but his book is still, or his work is still alive and with us. And his name is David R. Hawkins, and he is he was a scientist who really would research the spiritual realm. He was kind of, you can say he was a metaphysics scientist. He would try to understand spiritual phenomena from a scientific standpoint. Just because, for example, type 5s, who tend to be scientists often, or teachers or professors, they like to really look deeper into certain things. So, somebody might meditate and come to a certain realization, but if they go and tell a type 5 that realization, even though it might be absolutely true, like, hey, I think the nature of the world is like this, then the type 5 is going to ask, do you have research to back that up? Do you have data to support your thesis? And so on and so forth. So the reason I felt like David R. Hawkins is a great person to have as our number 1, a program by him would be a great first number 1 recommendation, is because he's a scientist. He talks the type 5 language, and who knows, he might have been a type 5 himself. But basically, his books are all about the nature of consciousness. And he has 2 phenomenal books. One's called Power versus Force, which talks about the levels of consciousness. And, from a scientific standpoint, how these levels rank on, let's say, a scope of consciousness. His other book, which what I'm going to recommend, is similar to this book, and I highly recommend this book as well. It's called Letting Go by David R. Hawkins. And the audio program that I am absolutely in love with and I'm going to recommend today is called Giving Up Illness Through A Course in Miracles. Now, just replace illness with limiting beliefs, because although it talks about illness, although it talks about physical health in the beginning of that audio program, but it's really talking about giving up the beliefs that are causing the disease. Because a lot of times diseases that manifest in our body are really just a manifestation of certain beliefs that have been getting in the way of us naturally experiencing health, really. And so he is talking about how he overcame certain health issues that he was facing all the time. Frequently, he was constantly having issues with something new would come up all the time that he had issues with in his health area. And he, I think, got into the Course in Miracles. Now, what is a Course in Miracles? Course in Miracles is it's a massive spiritual text that I personally love and follow its teachings very often. And it was a big part of my own journey, but I'm not going to recommend that, because that's something that it either calls to you or it doesn't, And if it does, you will know. It will find its way into your life. It's like when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And if the Course in Miracles is meant to be your teacher, you will know it. I believe that. And so Nonetheless, though, David R. Hawkins, he was a student of the Course, and he was able to use certain principles that are taught in the Course in Miracles and overcome these illnesses that have had the root ultimately in how he thought about certain things. And thinking is super important and for type fives, and super fascinating. Type fives, I think, want to always become better thinkers. They want to think often, they want to think better, they want to think more accurately. And so this book talks about how we can use our mind to overcome limiting beliefs that are causing us to have issues in our life. And it's really just like a conference that they've recorded. The audio quality is awful, but it's, you can still hear what they're saying, and the message though is just so good. And the reason I chose this book or audio program as the first one is because it helps us open our minds a little bit, and no learning can happen unless we open our minds. And type fives tend to kind of lag in that area of being once they feel like they know something, they don't want to open that up to more and more realizations. They might be so set, hey, this is it, this is the truth. If somebody else says something that might go against what they initially believe, they might reject it. The reason I chose that audio program as the first book that I'm going to recommend is because the first step to learning is being able to open our mind to ideas, to realizations that we might not be open to. And for type 5s, one of the downfalls of them having done so much research is that once they feel like they know, there's rarely changing that. They're very set in that understanding. So this book or audio program really is just a good way to ask and begin to wonder, what if there's more than what I initially thought? And some of the things he talks about are just like way out there, but because he's coming to them and at them from a scientific standpoint, it's easier for type 5 or all of us really to be like, there's more here. So that's just to kind of open the pathway for us to get into these other books that I'm going to recommend. So the second book I wanted to recommend is actually, again, another audio program. I'm sorry, guys. I listen to too many audiobooks and audio programs, and so I've been throwing those in there. But nonetheless, the content is phenomenal, whether you listen to it or buy his books. I've recommended this author in Type 3's book recommendation video, so if you want to check that out, you can find another one of his books recommended in there. But his name is Michael A. Singer. He is the author of The Untethered Soul, The Surrender Experiment, and also his audio program is called Living from a Place of Surrender. And that's the one I'm going to recommend today. Why? Because I've been listening to it, and because it's an audio program, it's not a written book. If you want kind of the written version of this, listen to Surrender Experiment or read The Surrender Experiment or The Untethered Soul. But in this audio program specifically, he's having a lot more of a casual conversation, and so I'm seeing a different side of him, and I'm hearing a different side of him in this. And this side of him, I think, really will appeal to type 5s. Why? Because he's a thinker. Michael A. Singer, he's definitely a very intellectual person, albeit he's teaching about spirituality, but he's very intellectual about it. Even though he's teaching spirituality that has a lot of yogic sense to it, but he's coming to it from a very type 5 perspective and realizations from that arena. So why did I choose this? Because type 5s, thinking that they have a very limited energy, they somewhat, and resources, they tend to be like the minimalists because they feel like we live in a scarce world. They might have had experiences in their childhood that reaffirm that this world is indeed a scarce place, and that we need to preserve our energy, we need to preserve our money, we need to preserve resources, everything. It's scarce. It's a scarce world, especially if they have a type 6 wing. dominant type 6 wing, they're going to feel that probably even more. So it's just really good for them to challenge that idea of scarcity. Like, is that true? You know, and Michael A. Singer helps you do that. It helps you really challenge certain ways that you have thought. It challenges me for sure when I listen to him. But it's a good kind of challenge. It's a good kind of challenge that helps us grow. It's one of those ways that you challenge your certain assumptions, and then you kind of see that those assumptions don't hold. And one of those things about Type 5s is that they want to protect their resources. They want to protect their time and all those things, and they have a lot of boundaries in place. They're over boundaried. One of their names for one of their subtypes is actually castle. It's like a castle. They have strong boundaries. But, they're militant about that, and they don't want to really surrender and like go with the flow of life, because they just so firmly believe that there are limited resources, I have limited energy, and if I surrender, if I let go of my grip on how things are and my boundaries, everything's going to fall apart. But the surrender experiment, or the surrender, basically living from a place of surrender book, that audiobook that I'm talking about, he challenges that. He challenges, he talks about how the universe like really is a system that organizes itself and figures itself out without, us trying to have a death grip on how things should go. And as we all know, with the COVID-19 thing that happened, like, we didn't, nobody wrote something about that in their New Year resolution, So like, it's almost like we can have our plans, but there is something bigger at play that we just need to sometimes learn to surrender and let go and trust that things will be fine. Because going back to the first audiobook that I was recommending, beliefs become manifestations. Beliefs become our reality. And so it's good to sometimes challenge those ways of thinking and open ourselves up to new ways of being that are going to be a lot more beneficial for us in the long term. And so that was number 2, because surrender can be super helpful for Type 5s. This next book, I feel like all of these are going to be audiobooks, except for the last one. But this one actually has a paperback as well, I'm pretty sure. This book is about, going back to what I was saying earlier, about Type 5s feeling like there is scarcity. There are a scarce amount of resources. And so sometimes they really believe that. And so this next book is about mainly entrepreneurship, but it's a lot bigger than that. It's a lot more in depth than that. And it starts, I feel like the first good chunk of this whole audiobook and book is about mental beliefs and overcoming certain ideas. Again, like challenging the idea of scarcity and so on and so forth. And it's by MJ DeMarco, and it's called Unscripted. The cover, I remember I had come across it, but I hadn't read it or listened to it, but because the cover is kind of cheesy, and I didn't feel like it's going to be something I haven't heard before. But the material of this book is just phenomenal. He really challenges our biases, and he basically proposes this idea that, like, okay, the way out of scarcity is through entrepreneurship. And you might not really find Type 5s becoming entrepreneurs, because that's a lot of things to manage, a lot of demands on your time, and so on and so forth. But we really live in an age where entrepreneurship looks a lot different than what it did. Like, maybe 30, 40 years ago, it meant like starting a company and then having to manage a bunch of employees and so on and so forth. But now, entrepreneurship might look like you starting an online business that you are in charge of, and you are in control of your destiny. And I know that sounds cheesy, but I think the tagline of that book actually is like the pursuit of freedom, or the pursuit of life, liberty, and entrepreneurship. Something about how like entrepreneurship really is a path to freedom, especially in the US or the West in general. And the reason I wanted to throw this in there is because it's just one of those books that kind of challenges us. It challenges us to think in new ways. And that's just something that type 5s not only find fascinating to do, but it's just good for us. It's good for us to like, okay, let's say I'm a type 5 and I think I live in a scarce world. Well, let's read this book about this guy, how he is overcoming all those limiting beliefs and is thinking in terms of how can I add value to the marketplace and through that experience massive abundance. And it's just good. It's just good to kind of get us out of that mode of thinking and open up to new possibilities. And so I recommended this book not because I'm saying, hey, type 5s, I think you should become entrepreneurs, but I recommended this book because I think type 5s, like, it would be good to sometimes challenge those tightly held beliefs based on, your research, because you want to kind of expand yourself and expand your horizon in order for you to become a new person, like grow into a more advanced, evolved version of yourself. And this book is just one of those books that challenges you, and whether you ever become an entrepreneur or never want to pursue that path, this book still can be massively beneficial because it talks about mental biases a lot, mental beliefs, all these things, and how to kind of overcome those. So, highly recommend Unscripted. This next book that I'm going to talk about is actually a book that wasn't really on my list of books to recommend, but being in that surrendered space where you're open to inspiration and ideas, this just came to my mind and I felt like it's a good book to recommend. It's all about meditation. It's by Emily Fletcher, I believe. And the book is called Stress Less, Accomplish More. And it's all about how to really meditate and the benefits of meditation. It's very scientific. It's for, I think one of the taglines of the book is, meditation for high performers or something like that. And it's all talking about basically a lot of high performers, a lot of achievers, a lot of thinkers, a lot of type 5s, a lot of, intellectual types sometimes don't really see the value of like slowing down and stopping and, just sitting here and doing nothing. But this book really goes in depth about the benefits of meditation because as a type 5, one of the gifts that you bring to the world is your thinking, is the clarity of decision that you can come to based on, really thinking through something in depth, doing your research. And meditation, even though it might seem like you're doing nothing, you're actually opening up the capacity for more clear thinking and more clear receiving of information through other channels besides the intellect, like your intuition. So this book, I'll keep it short and sweet. It's all about meditation. It's all about quieting the mind. And it's all about becoming a better performer, better achiever, better thinker through the use of meditation. And so I highly recommend that, and I'm glad that came to my mind. And it's because I have a meditation practice that I do believe, like sometimes I just get these intuitive feelings that, hey, say this, or mention this book, or do this and do that. And when I used to just be at the level of intellect, a lot of those options were not open to me because I was not open to receiving them. If we always depend on thinking to get our answers, we might be closing ourselves off to a much more mysterious and profound and deep way of knowing and understanding things that is open to our intuition. So I'm just gonna keep it at that. If you enjoyed this, first of all, I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you check those audio programs, those books out, and that you find them helpful. This video was hard for me to prepare for because I was like, how can I give a book that they haven't read already? But I'm sure that, there is one book at least in that selection that you might have not listened to or read. So check those out. Let me know if you have read them. Let me know if you got them and you listened to them and if you found them helpful. I truly believe and hope that they can be helpful. They certainly have been helpful for me, and I would never want to recommend a book that I personally haven't read or haven't listened to. So all of those are approved by me, as just another listener and a person that seeks to improve their life. And so I hope they do the same for you. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, all those good things that all the YouTubers say. So thank you so much, and hope to catch you in the next video for type 6 book recommendations. Thank you.